This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. Well, my guest today, the brilliant playwright and librettist Tammy Ryan, has created work that's been performed across the United States and internationally. She was awarded the Francesca Primus Prize by the American Theater Critics Association for her play Lost Boy Found in Whole Foods. Other plays include Molly's Hammer, Tar Beach, Soldier's Heart, Baby's Blues, FBI Girl, How I Learned to Crack My Father's Code, Pig, Lindsay's Oyster, and The Music Lesson. A New Kind of Fallout, written with composer Gilda Lyons, premiered at Opera Theater of Pittsburgh in 2015. Tammy was recently accepted as a resident playwright of the prestigious New Dramatists in the class of 2025. She's also an artistic associate of the NewYorkRep and a member of the Dramatists Guild of America. Her work is published by Dramatists Play Service, Broadway Play Publishing, Dramatics Publishing Company, and Playscripts. For more about Tammy and her work, please do check out tammyryan.net. Well, it is my great honor and pleasure to have the one of the very best playwrights working in today's theater, Tammy Ryan, in the studio with me today. Tammy, welcome.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Happy to be here.
For the record, Tammy and I have known each other for some time. We both live in the city of Pittsburgh, and we've crossed paths on more than a few occasions. Tell our listeners about your history. How did you become inspired in the beginning to write plays? What brought you to plays instead of novels or screenplays or whatever?
Right. Well, I grew up in Queens, New York.
Okay.
And my working class family, big Irish Catholic family, and never went to the theater. Never, had a lot of exposure to that. I guess I was a good writer as a student, so my mother encouraged me to write. But I had an uncle who was an actor in New York, and he would. He just sort of represented this exotic lifestyle after the bridge and tunnels, because we lived in Queens.
Sure.
So I was always kind of drawn to the theater through him, and decided, I wanted to be an actor. So that was like my escape.
Oh, so you started out thinking that you'd be an actor?
Yeah.
Do you still act at all?
No.
Okay. You just give actors grief.
I give actors good roles.
You give them meat. You give them something to chew on. Yes, of course.
So I decided I wanted to be an actor, and I eventually went to college and studied, act theater and literature. I wasn't cast a lot, and so part of that problem was I had a very thick New York accent. I was very rough. I had a lisp.
Really?
And
this is surprising to me.
Yeah, well, I did go through some speech therapy to get rid of the lisp. It comes back when I'm tired. Or I've had a few glasses of wine. Another student friend put me in her play. She wrote a play, and she cast me in it. So that was like one of my first sort of acting things at school. And I thought, well, if she can write a play, then maybe I could write a play. So I wrote a play. I wrote a 2-person sort of autobiographical play called Flying Pigeons. And
Flying Pigeons.
Yes, it was about my father, but my grandfather used to have pigeons on the roof, in Astoria.
Sure.
So it was sort of about that. And
were they carrier pigeons?
No, like the pigeons that they have in coops on roofs in New York, and they would they just sort of like, I don't know why, they just keep them as pets, and then they fly around and then they come back.
Got it.
So it's sort of an image of like flying, of sort of escaping.
Got it.
Which was a theme for me
You-
in my early work.
Has this repeated throughout your work? Escapism? Escaping?
Yes, in the
Freedom?
in the autobiographical plays, sort of transcending out of that sort of working class, sort of rough environment that I grew up in early.
And I'm not trying to interrupt you on your story because I'm going to let you
problem.
continue in a second, but it's always interesting to me when writers of any kind, sort of at the end of their careers, you can look back and see how those themes that were set early on continue all through.
Yes, yeah. Actually, so the first couple of plays that I've written were very much autobiographical family plays. Then I kind of went off in different directions as, my life changed. But the last couple of plays are kind of looking back. Like one of my most recent plays is Tar Beach, which takes place in 1977 in New York on a roof. Like the roof, the Tar Beach is the roof.
Roof.
I wasn't consciously realizing that I was doing that, but there is this sort of going back to that, which, we could talk about that a little bit later. But so I wrote this play, Flying Pigeons, and I showed it to my acting teacher, Jack Hunter, who I'm still in touch with and friends. He was a mentor for me. First person to encourage me to write, really. And I gave it to him, and then I didn't hear back for a week or something. And I went back up to him.
A whole week.
And he makes fun of me. He does the accent, and he said that I came up to him and said, "So, Mr. Hunter, did you read my play?" And he said, "Yes, I did, and you better write the second act because we're going to produce it."
Ooh.
And he produced it in the back of a bar in Buffalo, where I was at SUNY Buffalo, called Nietzsche's. And it was a wonderful production that ran for about a month. It was packed. I made my rent that month. I thought, wow, this is great. I want to be a playwright. This is a lot easier than
So
acting.
you hit it out of the park the first time.
Well, with that. But then I had to learn how to write a play after that, of course, and figured out that, this isn't really going to be that easy.
You're saying playwriting isn't easy. Yes, it's very challenging, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Because if it were easy, everybody would do it.
I guess so, but when you're starting out, you're doing it because you're compelled to do it. And I tell my students, you're very lucky right now. You're at the best place in a way in your careers because you're writing just out of the joy of it. You don't yet know how difficult it's going to be, and so you'll write some of the best work, I think, in the beginning because you're not thinking about what I should do, what makes a good play.
You're not shackled by any of the stuff that comes later, any of the baggage that you accumulate over time.
Right, the masterpiece syndrome.
Are you still compelled?
Yeah, I am compelled. I mean, I've often thought, well, I'm just going to stop writing now. But then the next play comes and you write the next play.
So you actually have moments where you say to yourself, I'm done.
Of many moments.
Many moments. Because it is painful to go through that process.
It's tough,
It is tough.
It's and then, rejection's not easy and it's hard to get your play produced and depending on your circumstances and where you live. I mean, I was lucky that I had the Pittsburgh Playhouse for 15 years was an artistic home for me.
That's very nice.
And that, I think, is why I really developed my craft because I was able to see plays produced and work with actors and directors. And, I mean, plays are meant to be seen. They're it's a craft that is developed in collaboration. Not only with actors and directors, but designers, So I was able to have all of that. And I don't, if I didn't have that, I think I probably would have stopped writing, honestly.
So it's kind of like the way I think about, because I've written my whole life, it's kind of the way I now think about the computer versus a typewriter. If you sent me back to the typewriter, I would say, forget it, I'm not going to be a writer anymore.
It's too hard.
It's too hard to be a writer to begin with, let alone with a typewriter.
Yeah.
So you're saying the same thing. You had these resources, which, by the way, most playwrights do not have early on in their lives.
Right.
So you were very fortunate.
Well, it came later. I mean, it didn't come right away. It was sometime after graduating from Carnegie Mellon for grad school. I came to Pittsburgh to do my MFA at Carnegie Mellon. That the Playhouse, actually it was John Amplis, called me up and asked me if they could produce one of my plays. And then they kind of adopted me. So I was lucky that way. Previous to that...
So in other words, you were in school when you got noticed here as a graduate student here at Point Park.
No, a couple years after.
Oh, a couple years after.
So it was 98. I graduated in 1990. More than a couple. It was like 8 years after.
Okay.
So right after graduating, I mean... I started working with Melissa Martin,
Yes.
and Ted Hoover, and in this theater company we kind of put together called Pyramid Productions,
Okay.
where we did festivals of 10-minute plays. This was like in the early 90s, before people were really doing it the way they're doing it now. And we invited 12 writers to do 10-minute plays with 6 directors and 6 casts. So if you in the first act, the cast would be in one play and they'd do another play in the second. So we had a lot of people involved, a lot of actors, and we gave ourselves assignments like, these are going to be 2-person plays, or these are going to be holiday plays, or we would have different themes. So we had this little apprenticeship that we sort of created for ourselves, where we would write these. We did them like at least every year, sometimes a couple of years, so we self-produced, and then after that we each produced, I think, one of our full-length plays, and then we started getting too big, and we were like, well, who wants to take the cubes home? Like that was the problem. And we were like, you know what? No. And I really wanted to be a playwright, and I really wasn't a great producer. If Melissa and Ted are listening to this, they'll agree to that.
Or clearly not a props master either.
Right, no.
So at what point in your writing career, so to speak, after you had done this for a while, at what point did you think to yourself, hey, I'm pretty good at this? Right away, or did it take some time?
Well, I got a lot of early encouragement. That play Flying Pigeons was a huge hit in Buffalo.
I'm sure it was like a drug that got into your system.
It was like a drug, actually. And people acknowledged me in a way they never acknowledged me for my acting. I had terrible stage fright, and I knew I was going to die if I kept being an actor. I wasn't going to be able to do that. I have great respect and admiration and love for actors.
Well, you must, because you're writing stuff for them to say. So
yeah,
you must have a lot of respect and admiration.
Yeah, and I think like an actor when I'm writing. I mean, I because I had that early actor training.
Are you seeing it in your head when you're writing?
Yeah, I'm seeing it. I'm hearing it. I'm kind of virtual reality-ish.
That's how it is for me too.
Yeah, right?
I see it on the screen. I just see it playing out.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like the characters sort of just totally take over and they write for you?
They have to do that. At a certain point, they have to do that. Otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere. You know. So that's sort of the goal. I do a lot of. My process includes a lot of sort of exploratory writing and exercises to create those characters and get them talking. And when they start doing that, then I know I'm ready to write the draft.
Give us an example of an exercise that you go through.
So there is okay. Let me think. I gotta think fast.
Do you just write and write and write?
I do some exercises in place. Well, I'll put the characters in certain situations that pressure them in certain ways. So one of the best exercises I've ever done was this play called with Connie Cogden in a workshop I did at Primary Stages called I call it On the Roof. It's how Tar Beach was born, actually, in this workshop setting, and I use this often with my students. You put 2 characters on a roof. You decide where you are, what year it is, what time it is, what is the environment, what are the environmental pressures, what are they doing on the roof. Go, and then you write, and then you stop. Then you interrupt that. Another character comes in. They have one line. Then they leave. You got 10 seconds to write that. Go, and then you write the next part. Okay, stop. Now you're in a new location. That new character and another character are in a room. Any location. Go. 5 minutes. So I do a lot of fast writing and I try to interrupt it. Like when I think I know where it's going, I try to interrupt it. So I'm and this is just an exercise. This is just to get things going, to access the subconscious. That's the idea of it.
I'm imagining, because that's a great exercise that I'd never heard of before. So that's a really great exercise. I'm imagining that what that does is it suddenly forces you to let the characters do whatever as it's coming.
It stops you from thinking. I mean, that's like my main mantra. It's like, how do I stop thinking? Because, and again, it goes back to when I was an early writer. I didn't think about it. I was just compelled to write it. I had this feeling, these characters were in my head, these voices, the dialogue. Later, as I started to learn more about the craft, because I had to teach myself the craft, and then I went to school and learned it, I knew, this is terrible. This isn't active. They're just talking. This is a terrible play, because I knew what made a good play, but that's impeded that first draft. It has to come out just from that irrational creative well, right? It's the thinking part, the editor, the analyzer, the rewriter. I love to rewrite. You got to separate those two things. So.
Are you have a tough time with first drafts like me, but
Yes.
you love to rewrite?
Yes,
That's me too.
First drafts are terrible. I mean, for me, I was just like pulling them out of, really, hopefully the subconscious.
Have you ever read Annie Lamott's Bird by Bird?
I love that book. I love her.
Her
Yes.
chapter, Shitty First Drafts,
Yes.
that's what it's all about.
Yes, absolutely. And it's really hard to let yourself do that, especially the more you know about what makes a good play.
Oh, it's really hard for as you know, I teach here at Point
Yeah.
Park. And for some students, it's really hard for them to imagine that they can just write garbage and then come back to it. They think they have to perfect it as they're
Right.
going, and that's I think that's actually stultifying. I
Right.
think it
Right.
actually hurts you.
Right.
Just be free and go. Be loose and free
Right.
and let it out. It's kind of like I always equate it to the sculptor who sculpts in clay. You actually have to make the clay, and then
Right.
you can sculpt
Absolutely.
the clay.
Absolutely.
That's how I think of it.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And that's why I sort of began to come up with some of these exercises, or go to books that have these exercises
Sure.
to kind of stop that thinking and just try to access that. Again, looks like the subconscious, so it just comes out.
So early on, who were your biggest influences when you were looking at playwrights or plays?
Right.
Who were your influences?
Very first one I would have to say is Sam Shepard. So I was an undergraduate, and it was an introduction. It was not in Buffalo. It was at Queens College, where I first went to school, and Arthur Miller was on there, Tennessee Williams. Of course, I loved these plays. But when we read Buried Child, I was like, oh my God, you can do that. You can really write that. And of course, I didn't grow up in the West, and I wasn't, but it just spoke to my experience in such a deep way that I understood now what plays could do.
And who else? Anyone else?
And then I would say Carol Churchill.
Carol Churchill.
She's
Churches,
sort of
right?
Churchill.
No, Churchill, right.
Yeah, she's a hero of mine. Being a woman, actually being so prolific, and combining the personal and the political in a way that just seems seamless to me. I don't necessarily write like her, but there's sort of permission I found from her early on, because she was a mother, and this is where I was coming up writing as a young mother, and that you could put these two things together, the personal and the political.
And that prior to that, before that realization, you really thought it was what? That you couldn't do that?
Well, I didn't think about it. I was just writing my own stories. But maybe Carol Churchill helped me kind of think broader than the individual family. Looking at sort of the social systems that sort of created some of the dynamics that are in my plays. Just thinking a little more broadly. It wasn't more of like it just kind of opened my mind a little bit about what plays could do.
How many of your plays would you say are family based?
Almost all of them. I mean, everything I write is through the lens of family in some ways.
And that's informed by your own family, I assume.
Because I grew up in a big family. I think. I mean,
lots of dynamics.
There were 6 children in my family, and so a lot of my plays have 6 characters. It's not. Someone once said that to me, like, "How many kids are in your family?" I'm like, 6. She was like, "Mm-hmm." So I have written as little as 3 characters. My play Molly's Hammer has 3 characters, but they play a lot of different roles. Some of them. And I have 4 character plays, but I always my go-to is kind of that 6 number. I just sort of view the world from that point of view, as not beginning as a daughter and a sister, and then as a mother. Like my life really was defined by having children. My girls are 9 years apart, and so like in my 30s I was raising one, and in my 40s I was raising another one. So. It's sort of how I see the world, I guess.
Going back to the dynamic of 6,
yeah.
Would you say that the characters each fill certain human, I don't know what you'd say, some human position, some human thing? So one is the brains, one is the muscle, and so on and so on. Would you say they fill those kinds of roles for you, or not?
I don't know. I mean, I often write about. There's always teenagers in my plays.
Always.
Usually. Let's say often. I think probably because I'm sort of stuck in that place.
Really?
I don't think I can think. I mean, I guess if I look back at my plays, I could analyze them that way, and I could say, oh yeah, this represents this, that. I often have similar. I feel like, oh, I'm writing this again. I'm writing this woman again. I'm writing this girl again. I'm writing this relationship again.
Does that bother you?
No, because
Or do you take relief,
it's
solace
connected. It's connected to what I feel like I have to keep saying. But each play is very different. That said, I think that's been a challenge a little bit in my career. Is that my plays, given I'm talking about similarities, right? There's often a family dynamic. There's often a teenager or whatever. But the subject matters range widely, and stylistically, they're often different.
Mostly dramas, though, yes?
Comedy dramas. I
Comedy
would say
dramas.
dramedies or dark comedies, or there's always humor. I mean, there's some of them pretty heavy and dark, but told with humor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that just makes it all the easier to take, I think, as an
Right.
audience.
It opens you up, and it opens an audience up, and then you can get in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can make your point a lot easier when it's when there's some kind of
Right.
relief to it, rather than it just being heavy and
Right.
dour the whole way through.
Right. Well, I think we engage emotionally. We engage audiences emotionally, whether it's humor or
Well, I think you better, or you're
Yeah.
in trouble.
right.
I think it's all about passion and emotion,
Right.
and if you don't get there, people are just going to walk away.
Right.
All right. So when you get an idea for a new show, well, let's talk about ideas for a second.
Okay.
Where did you say oi?
I said okay.
Okay. I, thought
Oi,
you- I
oi,
heard
okay.
I heard oi over here on this side of the
Okay.
studio. Where do you get your ideas from? Your daily life, from reading, from where do you find your ideas?
I would have to say as a combination of all of that, I'm a little bit of a pack rat. It's usually about something that I'm sort of wrestling with, even if I don't, even subconsciously, or I don't know.
Something that you want to resolve for yourself.
Yes, right, exactly. And then I'll start to look out in the world. Everything that I read or experience or observe kind of is all in there. And when I start to think, okay, I think I'm going to write a play about this, I'll start writing a lot of notes, keeping notebooks, and then you sort of notice the world just sort of presents that to you all the time.
Sure.
So if like a pregnant woman is going to see pregnant people everywhere, right? It's because you're pregnant.
Yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, it's sort of like that. And usually I feel like I don't really have a play until I've made that connection between the personal and the larger thing that I want to write about.
And somehow an idea bubbles up out of that?
Yeah. It's
Do
like
you become inspired by, say, a news event or something like that?
that could happen. For instance, my play Soldier's Heart, I was kind of alerted to the epidemic of rape in the military, like way before the Me Too movement. So I wrote Soldier's Heart in 2013, but even a couple of years before that, there began to be articles in the New York Times about the prevalence of rape in the military, and I was like, wow, I have to write about this. This somehow I'm interested in. I was interested in women in the military and the influence of women in the military, and then I was like, well, I have to connect it to this. So
there's that compulsion again. You're
Yeah.
compelled to do it.
right,
And
yeah,
I think that's an important part of the artistic process, that I think if you're just doing it to do it, you may not get very far. But
Yeah.
when you're compelled to, then it's
Right.
from inside of you.
right, because it takes a long time. I mean, writing a play takes a long time.
What's the longest it's taken you to write a play?
Well, my play. Lost Boy Found Whole Foods.
Yeah.
I researched for 7 years before I gave
Wow.
myself permission to actually write it, and then it takes a couple years probably to finish. Through multiple drafts and stuff like that.
How long does it typically take you to write a draft? Is there a typical?
Well, once I sit down to write the draft, after I've done a lot of the sort of pre-work that I do in character and place and whatever it is I think I want to write about, I will try to write every day. I'll try to carve out that time. It'll take a couple weeks if I'm in residency somewhere, away from family. I often go to Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, so I'll go there for 2 weeks, and I can bang out pretty much the whole draft
in 2 weeks.
in 2 weeks. But that's having nothing else to do. So my normal life would probably take about 3 months.
I see.
Yeah,
I see. So when you're able to go day in, day out,
yeah.
mostly all day long.
Because you write. It's just every day in residency. Every day is like 3 days. So
Right.
you have like after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner.
Sure.
So
Sure.
And they're making all the meals and cleaning up. So.
And all you have to worry about is your thing.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Do you pay for that, or is that something you're invited to do? Or?
I have not paid for them. I've had fellowships, a couple of different places there, and another place I went to is Hambidge Center in Georgia.
There are numerous of these places.
There's a ton of them.
There's Yaddo. There's lots of places.
Right, McDowell.
Yeah. There's lots of places,
Yeah.
and you have to apply for them.
Yeah.
And then they make a decision. We like you. We don't like you. We see what you're doing. We want to encourage you and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's usually what it is.
Yeah. Then VCCA is only about 6 hours from Pittsburgh, and they're very interested in Pittsburgh artists. So it's not just writers; it's all kinds of artists. And half of their people that are there in residency at any one time are new. So they try to keep cultivating new artists.
That's very smart of them, because that's a means of continuing to renew, keep the thing fresh, I guess. To keep your experience
and keep
fresh.
All right,
All right, so now you've got your idea, and you've started to take notes, and you've done your research, and you've gone through this whatever regimen of research that you've gone through, and you sit down to write.
Yeah.
What is the first thing you do?
Well,
do you outline?
Yes. The first thing I do is I outline. I write an action map, what I call an action map.
Okay.
Where it's just basically this happens and causes this to happen and causes that to happen. So I kind of see how the movement of the play in sort of broad strokes. So I don't have to think about that. Like my early plays.
But it's not in detail.
No, not too much detail. But it will start to, as I work on that, it will start to go into detail, and then those will turn into scenes. So I use that as a way to sort of launch scene writing. Mm-hmm. My early plays like Flying Pigeon and Pig, I just started Act 1. This is what I see, and they all start talking, and I never looked at where I was going. But now it's like you don't have that much time anymore. Like when I was 30, I don't have as much time, so that's why I outlined. And then I'll work on that for a while, and then when I'm ready to start drafting, I have that as a guide, as a map that I'll follow.
Do you rigidly adhere to it?
No. I will change it. I will rewrite it. I will go off road. I'll come back. I'll rearrange things.
Because the play begins to have its own life.
Right. And usually I'll be really good with the outline until I start getting into the second act, and then I'll know nothing. I don't know how to get through the mountains and then I'll have the end. I'll see the end. Or feel the end.
So do you know what screenplays, the second acts of screenplays are known as in Hollywood?
What?
They're the place where good ideas go to die.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's the second act. It's like this is where.
How do you bridge that?
It's like this is where you find out if you have a play or not. It's in the second
act,
right?
That's the heart of it, because if you can't carry that second act, you're in pretty deep doo-doo.
Right.
And so okay, so it's interesting to me that you do some form of an outline that you don't rigorously follow, but you follow to a large extent. Yeah. It gives you, as you say, an action map. It gives you a way to proceed.
Right.
Versus I don't know what to do next.
Right.
And the problem that you would be up against otherwise, there are many writers that don't use outlines, but I think that what you're up against otherwise is you can get down a blind alley and stuck.
Right. And I hate that feeling.
There's nothing worse than that, is there? It's better to know, okay, at least I've got an out over here that I've already thought through.
Right.
And if you go down that road and it doesn't work, you can come back and try it a different way.
Because the whole idea is just to finish, right? To get the first draft finished. And then you can change everything. Then you can completely unpack and rewrite and change and go a different path.
Well, you're back to that you've got the marble, and you've trimmed the marble down, and now you're really going to make the sculpture.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so you have to have that first draft is so critical.
Yeah.
And do you then go a lot slower on the rewrites than you did? Because I think 2 weeks is pretty fast to write a play.
Yeah. Well, that's in residency somewhere. I'm
not saying there's anything wrong with that, by the way. I'm saying that it's really good that you're able to knock it out that fast.
Well, it's not always. I mean, that's the goal. I mean, I have done it, and that's what I try to do. But, again, it's the goal. It may take longer. But, so the rewrite process, though, is different, because then I will let it sit for a while. I'll let it simmer and then come back to it and probably go through it again before I would show it to anybody. Mm-hmm. So that fast draft is to just get that initial impulse out. And
that's your purge draft.
And that I wouldn't show anybody, right? Yeah, I know that analogy of the well, I had this one. I had my professor at Carnegie Mellon used to call it the vomit draft,
vomit draft.
which I hate that word.
There's all those words. Puke draft, purge draft, they're all there.
I rather think of it like Tony Kushner would say that the first draft of a play should be like an overstuffed lasagna, just on the verge of falling apart. So that's much more palatable to me.
And tastier.
Exactly. But then I'll eventually show it to somebody, and I'll have a reading. I'll have a reading in my house, or I'll just get a couple of actors together or whatever. Then start getting feedback, and then the reading process will start of having readings and revisions and readings, and that goes back and forth for a while.
And how many of those do you do before you feel like you could send it to a producer?
Not a few. Not
few.
too many, you know. I mean, because part of the way I get my plays produced is I go through these developmental routes, right? So, for instance, the Repertory Theater of St. Louis produced my play Molly's Hammer, but
nice.
They brought it the year before to their Ignite Festival, which is a series of readings, and you have like 5 days to work on the play, whatever. My Lost Boy I developed at the New Harmony Project, which was 10 days in residence there, working with actors and directors and dramaturgs. And
was that getting daily rewrites?
yes, yeah. So the writer could go. You could be in rehearsal, or you could be in your house writing.
But you'd see it, which is the only way to really know whether it works or not, right?
Right. And at the end, you have a reading. You have a public reading at the end of these. Usually at the end of these festivals, they end up in a reading.
And then you get public feedback.
Right. Yeah, and you're working with director and dramaturg, and you're getting feedback all the time.
That's very helpful, isn't it?
Yeah. No,
it's also
essential.
terrifying, I assume.
I don't find it terrifying, really.
No, you welcome it.
No, I do welcome it. I don't. That to me is why, because I started out in the theater wanting to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's why I write plays, to get in the room, to be in collaboration with people.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that it's not terrifying. And the reason why I asked the question is because I think a lot of young, new, up-and-coming writers are terrified by it. They're afraid to show their work to anybody. They're afraid to let it out. They're afraid of that thing called rejection that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So that I welcome having readings.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to sit there and take notes and go, oh, my goodness, this doesn't work at all.
Right.
And then you have the opportunity to fix it.
Right.
Because on paper, it's still in your head, really.
Yeah. But you also have to learn how to take feedback too, because
absolutely.
I have been lucky, maybe because of my early experience at Carnegie Mellon, which I called like theater boot camp. We had this thing called special projects where we would show our plays to. I guess they were freshmen, I think, that were in special projects with us, and they would give us feedback on our plays.
Wow.
And they were like, questions, and really these kids didn't really know how to respond to plays, so we were sort of like thrown to the sharks there, and you had to figure it out. And I watched a lot of writers lose their plays by trying to answer everybody's questions.
Well, you ultimately have to only answer to yourself,
right? Yeah, you have to figure out what's important.
So let's talk about that for a second. When you're writing, are you writing for anyone in your mind, for a specific audience, or yourself or your family? Are you writing for someone who's your target, so to speak?
No, I don't know. I don't think about that. I don't think. Sometimes I think about actors that I know, and or I'll think about. I think for many years I was writing for the Playhouse. I was thinking about that studio space where my plays were done. So I was almost writing for that space, and then I wanted to kind of like get a little expand a little bit. So I maybe I think about theaters, but I don't necessarily think about audiences. I don't think.
That's interesting. You think about the space that it's going to go in versus the people that are going to watch it.
I think so.
I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because what it tells me is that you are visually oriented and that you're thinking scenically.
I am. Yeah. I am definitely. I'm thinking about the theater, because I started writing. I used to write. I wrote poetry when I was young, and but I didn't come to playwriting through like journalism or fiction or anything like that. I mean, I came from doing it.
Sure.
Like in acting classes. Mostly.
Well, we've come to a point now in the theater where it's in the major commercial theater, we're in competition with big budget motion pictures and TV shows, right? And so the theater has sort of pushed toward these bigger, more imaginative things as commercial enterprises. So you get Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark.
Oh, yeah.
You get Beauty and the Beast live on stage.
Right.
You get The Lion King live on stage.
Right.
And so the stage then stops being quite so limited, even though it is limited. It's physically, the space is physically limited. So what I'm going back to is that you write to the physical limitation of the space, even though you can go out beyond it in imagination.
Right. Well, I've been lucky also at the Playhouse and in Pittsburgh. We have incredible designers here.
Of
I
course.
worked with Steffi Meyer-Staley and others, and so I kind of learned about what's possible in sort of theatrical design, and and I think in metaphors, in terms of theatrical metaphors
Nice.
when I'm writing. So I mean, that's why I write for theater rather than write movies.
Sure.
You know?
Although you can write in metaphors for movies too.
Yeah, you can. But but because like when you said I was visually oriented, I not visually like in terms of film.
No, so thank you for correcting me, because that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that you were writing for big vistas and
Yeah.
things like that, but the visual nature of the space that you're in.
I would call it visceral rather than visual.
sure.
So because I think of screenwriting, screenplays as telling visual storytelling, right?
Sure.
And for the theater, it's a visceral experience. So I'm thinking about the building. I'm thinking about the audience sitting in there. I'm not a specific kind of audience like City Theater subscribers or people
or teenagers
or whatever.
Blue-haired little old ladies
right
from New Jersey.
Right. I'm not thinking of that. I'm thinking about the human experience in the building.
Right.
In the space.
Right. Well,
in the theatrical space, and what's possible that way.
And I think that you're if I understand your canon, so to speak, that you don't write big science fiction-y kinds of things with lots of big sets and big lights and all that.
No.
You tend to write more about the heart.
Yeah.
And more people and people
Yes.
dealing in conflict with other people.
Right. Yes.
And I think that is that visceral thing you're talking about that really punches you in the gut where it's supposed to punch you. I mean, that's why we do this.
Yeah.
So when you've got the play, you've got a producer, somebody's willing to give you a stage and some money to put it on, and so on. What are the challenges from there for you?
Oh, that's easy. Then it's like, what am I going to wear to opening now?
Oh, is it really that easy?
Well, no. That's all the hard work comes before that. Then it's like then it's the enjoyment part. Then it's like I can't wait. I can't wait to get in the room. I can't wait to see what they do. I can't wait to talk to the director, and I can't wait to come to that first read through. See the first set design. That first rehearsal.
Okay, so in those firsts, are there still changes happening?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm rewriting all the way through. I mean,
That's what I was getting
until
to.
opening. Until it opens.
Do you ever change it after you've had a show open?
Yes, because then for the next one, for the next production. So it takes about 3 productions to sort of set it.
Okay, and once you have that and you finally figure out how to get someone to publish it for you,
Yeah.
Do you ever change them after it's been published?
No, but I have wanted to. My first play, Pig, I think I published too soon. I would probably definitely rewrite that second act now. But it is what it is, and I wrote that a long time ago.
Well, Stephen Sondheim famously changes shows.
Does he?
When they get revivals.
Really?
Famously changed
Yeah.
the lyrics in West Side Story.
Yeah.
He changed the lyrics in Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong. You're the copyright holder.
Right.
Which is the beauty part of theater, by the way, is
Right.
that you get to hold your
Right.
copyright as
Right.
opposed to movies and TV where you lose your copyright. And so if you say one day to the publisher, "Hey,
Yeah.
I've decided to make a change,"
Yeah.
they might not let you because they don't want to spend the money on those
Right.
changes. But they
But
can't.
I could change
you
it.
Could,
I mean,
so
yeah.
you could. Let's say St. Louis rep says to you,
Yeah.
"We want to do a play that's we want to do Pig, right?" And you go in and you say, "You know what? I don't like that play the way
Right.
it is, and I want
Right.
to change X,
Oh,
Y, and Z."
I
They'll
would.
change it for
I
you.
would definitely. I mean, in fact, if there was a revival, if I had revivals, if Pig was revived, actually, the Pittsburgh Playhouse did a wonderful production of Pig in 1998. I think it's due for a revival, but I would totally look at that second act again. I would.
You'd fix it
I would fix it. I would.
because you've had the gift of perspective.
I would, instead of thinking fix, because I try not to think that way.
How do you think?
I would say realize, just like let it be what it's going to be. Like just
Further massaging.
further massage it. Yeah.
That's a much nicer way to say
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know why I do, but I think of things as fixing things.
Yeah, I know. Well, we often do, but like because I teach so much, I try not to make it a negative thing. Like revising is revisioning. It's not. You don't want to think of it as fixing problems because that's like a negative connotation. So I try to reorient.
You're a positive thinker.
Trying. My husband would argue against that, but
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a big, broad question. For you, whether it's yours or others, what makes a good story good?
Well, first, one that is emotionally compelling and that engages an audience emotionally, not just through the head, and one in which you don't see it coming. You don't know. You're not like ahead of the story. And there has to be change, but it must feel both inevitable and surprising. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense,
Yeah.
and it confuses the hell out of young people
Yeah.
when you tell them exactly what you just said. A great story should be inevitable, and yet you shouldn't see it coming.
Right, exactly.
That means that the only way to get there really is for you, the author, to be way out ahead of it.
Right. You have to know where you're taking them.
Exactly.
I have my professor again at Carnegie Mellon, Arthur Jerome. He'd say a playwright needs to take the audience by the hand. The audience has to trust that playwright, that you're taking them down the path, that you know where you're going, and yet you're not going to show them everything at once. That's because it's drama. It's revealed over time. It's revealed scene by scene, and you want to give them just enough that's going to get them where they need to go. And that's what makes it difficult. Lately I've been trying to, people have been asking me for excerpts for different things, to show excerpts for, I think
Sides?
Excerpts like just 5 minutes of your play. So I'm going to New Dramatists in September. I have a new playwright welcome. I have to present 5 to 7 minutes.
Got it.
And I'm having a difficult time choosing those 5 to 7 minutes because I'm nervous also. But everything in a play that, the meat of the play, heavy, what is it? I think Stephen Dietz says this, is like heavy is late.
Heavy is late.
I'm sure I'm misquoting him completely, but the idea of like the heavy stuff comes later, and like the meat of it comes later, and
Sure.
the payoffs come later, and the good, really great writing is later,
Or what we call rising action,
Right.
so that you build to it.
right.
You don't blow the whole cookie in the
Right.
beginning.
But we've been set up for it all along. So when you excerpt that, it doesn't have the same power as it has when you see it in the whole context.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Sure, of course not.
So I find myself, using excerpts early in the play that just sort of laying out the characters.
And you don't
starting.
want to just give them the first 5 pages or something.
Yeah, because it takes longer than 5 pages.
But you know what I'm saying. You're not giving them you don't want to give them
Right.
that opening.
Right.
You want to give them something from
right.
the heart
That's
of
a
it.
scene. That's a scene that has some meat on it. And so I've been finding that I'm choosing like the second and third scenes of plays.
I would submit to you that probably the solution to that, and I could be wrong, is the way that it's set up in its introduction before they perform it.
Say that again?
Okay, so I assume they're going to have actors do them, yes, or they
Yes.
just okay. So
yeah.
so it's however
Right.
you write the introduction.
Right.
Here's what happens.
Right, you have to set it up.
If you set that up well, then the
Yeah.
scene will play fine.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
don't set it up
Right.
well, it'll just lay there.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good.
So a lot of that has to do with
Yeah.
the words you use
Yeah.
to set it up.
I just don't know how much time I have for that. I think I only have like 5 to 7 minutes. But
You got to figure out how to do it in about
yeah,
30 seconds.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's maybe the hardest kind of writing
Yeah.
of all. That
Ugh,
really short,
yeah.
tight stuff.
Synopses.
It's
Yeah.
that's really hard
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the New Dramatists. This
Okay.
is a big deal.
Yeah.
This is a really big deal. In the history of theater, there are only X number of people that have ever been through this program.
600.
600. And
Yeah.
when did it start?
1949.
Okay, so that's what, 60 some odd years,
Yeah.
right? Almost
Yeah.
70 years.
Yeah. 70 years next year.
Okay, 70 years, and in 70 years, only 600 people have gone through it. And
Hmm.
in that group have
Mm-hmm.
come out some spectacularly famous plays and names.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
And so to be accepted into that, you're accepted into a very prestigious club.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're nervous about it.
Oh, yes.
because now you're being exposed to people who are
Yeah.
perhaps at a league that maybe you haven't played in very much.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
I think that just makes you grow.
Yes. I'm looking at it that way, but I'm excited. I'm really gratified. I mean, it's very validating to get something like that. And it also came at a time where I was really kind of like, I've been at this for a while. My plays are getting done. I do get them done. I mean, is my career where I want it to be? No, of course not. But I live in Pittsburgh and I'm a teacher. And so I was like really moving more into, okay, I'm going to do more teaching. I'm going to kind of relax a little bit. Maybe I'm not going to chase this career the same way, whatever. And then I got it. So it's sort of like when I kind of let go of this kind of ambition, and now I'm here. And now like, no, you're not done. You're not done. So I feel like I have like I'm like at a new stage. I'm ready to start again and see what's ahead.
And it's a 7-year program.
7 years, yeah.
And so it's sort of like Star Trek. It's a 7-year mission. You're going into the outer reaches.
That.
Yes,
I like that analogy. I love Star Trek.
Well, that's what it's kind of like. You're going off on a mission.
Yeah.
And your mission is to is there a goal that they set for you? Like you need to write 2 plays, 5 plays?
No, it's up to me what I do. I'm the artistic director of my residency, and I will decide what I want to work on. What they have different they provide different services like readings, workshops, and connect you with collaborators, opportunities to go to residencies and different things like that. I'm going to learn more specifically in September when I go for the orientation.
Do they provide dramaturgs and things like that?
Yes, if you need them, if that's what you're looking for, they want you to think about, what do I need for this particular project? What kind of resources that do I need to make this? What questions am I asking about this piece? How do I want to work on this piece? How do I want to develop that piece? So you could have in-house readings, you could have public readings. They invite the New York theater community to come to these readings. And this is, I've been sort of thinking about this all summer because I found out in May that I got in. In September is the new Playwright Welcome, and we have more specific orientations. And then they ask you to they give you some prompts to sort of think about how do you want to use these 7 years? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to unleash is the word they use. So I'm excited.
And you should be, because that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Now, so you're going to interact with how many in your class?
There are 7. So every year is 5 to 7 people are brought in.
And you'll get to know the other 6 classes ahead of you as well.
Yes.
So
there's 50 in residence, 51 in residence right now, I think.
And I mean, it's an absolute affirmation of that you've been doing something right.
Or that I've just persevered and
I think it's beyond
kept
persevering.
applying. I mean, I applied to this many times. Someone told me apply every year until you get in. It's a really easy application, and so I used to do it to just sort of reset my intentions every year. It was just something automatically that I would just apply. I never really expected to ever get in.
So when you got that acceptance letter, you must have been knocked off your feet.
Yeah. I was. I couldn't speak. No, actually, I didn't get a letter. They called me.
Well, that's a
on
difference.
The phone. So I was like,
it's that thing today. If you get an email, you're done.
Yes.
If you get a letter in the mail, maybe. But if you get a phone call, you've gotten something.
Yeah.
Nobody bothers to call you anymore.
Right. It's the big things they call you.
That's correct. They want to have a personal
right. They want to hear
connection.
your reaction.
And so, do you already know pretty much what you want to do in the next 7 years? And you don't have to tell me. I'm just curious.
I mean, I'm in the middle of developing a new play, Hurricane Colleen, which I just was at the Repertory Theater of St. Louis at their Ignite Festival this past March. So I'm hoping to maybe develop that, to start with that. I have a new play that I'm writing. I have about probably the first act, so I'm like in the middle of it, I'll develop that. But I mean, I'd like to. Meet more directors specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Develop relationships with directors and actors and people in New York. It's an opportunity to have some visibility there.
Of course, and you're not going to be going to New York a bunch.
A couple times, yeah. I'll see how that's going to work out, but yeah.
Well, they require you to be up there.
Yeah. No, I have to go. But it's up to me how I use it. But I don't have to live there. So when there was an article came out about it, and I was in New York, and my daughter was reading the article, and she's like, "Oh my God, is Mom moving to New York?" Not moving to New York yet, but
you're going to spend.
I'll be
some
going
time
back
there.
and forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all of those of us in the community are very happy for you.
Thank you.
It's really exciting, you know. And I hope you take every advantage of it. I hope you take a great big old bite out of that big apple.
I will. And it's going to be fun. I mean, I'm looking forward to just something new. You know, I'm always up for adventure. So.
All right. So in your work, is there anything that you've now been through in production that you've learned that you would never want to do again?
In production.
In other words, when I say in production, not something that you're currently writing or haven't given to anyone yet, something that's already been produced. Have you been through an experience in getting a show produced that you've actually been involved in some way, whether it's first production or whatever, in which you've learned, hey, you know what, this was I tried this, I'll never do this again.
Yeah.
Anything like that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there is. I'm just not thinking of one right now.
Is there anything that you would repeat because it was so wonderful? You would do it time and again.
Oh yeah. Well, I would go to the New Harmony Project again. I would. Well, I would do almost everything again. I tend to work at the same places. Like people will bring me back. Like Ignite brought me back for a second time at the Rep. Premier Stages in New Jersey has done a number of my plays. I would always go back there. I've mostly been lucky. I think some of this is because my career has been somewhat constrained by living in Pittsburgh and raising two kids and kind of being focused on my family a lot. So I have to be choosy about what I do. I always work with people that I know. I don't like send things out to like this.
You don't?
You know, not you. No, not really.
Well, how do you get to know those people in the first place?
Yeah, I know.
It sounds a little catch-22.
It's always like there's always an introduction, I guess. But then I tend to go back to them. So I'm because maybe I've just been lucky.
And part of that. So this is an important lesson for newer writers.
Yeah.
Part of what you're talking about, you're alluding to it without saying it, is that you've developed good relationships with these people.
Right.
And when you develop poor relationships with those people, they don't let you back.
Right.
So you have to establish good relationships.
Right.
And that, for a lot of writers, that's an issue only because they're afraid to come out of their room sometimes.
Yeah.
And when they start to come out into the real world and have to deal with real people, they sometimes go, wait a minute, how do I do this?
I mean, this business is all about relationships. I'm sure.
Totally.
I'm sure screenwriting, Hollywood is also.
100%.
But the theater, especially, people want to work with people they like. They want to work with people who are good in the room. They're not,
Absolutely.
So it is all mostly about relationships. So.
Yeah, it's true in probably every business.
Yeah.
That exists, every business. But the truth is, when it comes to a collaborative business like the theater or movies or TV, it's all about who you know, not so much what you know or what your talent is.
Yeah, it's true.
Because if they've brought you in, if they've looked at your work and they've brought you in, they've already determined that you have talent and something they want. So the next step is, do they like you? And if that step goes poorly, then they might work with you once, but they may not work with you again.
Maybe not. Yeah, because there's so many plays out there. There's so much good writing out there right now. So it's like there's lines around the block to every theater of the plays that an artistic director wants to do. Why would they waste time working with somebody who's going to give them a hard time?
That's correct.
So there's another brilliant play right around the corner.
And yet you hear about certain successful playwrights who are allegedly pains in the butt.
Well, they must be bringing in box office. So.
I'm not going to bring up any names, but there are definitely famous playwrights who are supposedly difficult to deal with.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure.
And and maybe they've earned the right to be slightly difficult.
I try not to be one of them.
I have a hard time picturing you being that. So, all right. Well, we're coming toward the end of the show.
Okay.
This has been a fabulous conversation.
Great. I've enjoyed it.
Good. Do you have, in your experience, a quirky or a weird or a funny or an offbeat story that we might enjoy?
Okay. Well, so after I graduated from Carnegie Mellon, I very shortly after that became pregnant. So I was 6 months pregnant, and decided it would be a good idea because I'm all about self-production at that time because no one was producing my plays then. So you had to get them up there on the boards so you can grow as a writer. I don't know why I thought 6 months pregnant would be a good time to do this, but I decided I was going to produce a staged reading of my play. My examples for stage readings then were the Carnegie Mellon Showcase of New Plays, where Frank Galliano was the artistic director, and they would do script in hand, and they would move around a little bit. There was some staging involved, so I thought, okay, well, we'll do a little staging, and I found Denise Pullen was my director, and she was willing to do this, and so I found a venue at a restaurant club. I don't know what it is now, but it's on Smallman in the Strip District, and it was called Rosebud. And it would do some artistic stuff. It'd have, there must have been some plays. I don't know where I got the idea that this would be a good venue, but I think were open to the artistic community. So we're going to do the reading there, and in rehearsal, the actor pulls out a prop, and it was a bank book because in the play Pig, it was Pig. The father steals the daughter's bank book. And that led to all the props in the world. And there's a lot of props in this play. So like beer cans and a gun and a big garbage bag with a dead pig in it. Okay. You have to read the play to find out what all that means. But anyway, and then we brought in a picnic table and benches. I mean, we were like creating a set. I mean, it was like we were out of control. And then in the venue, they gave us a little stage, but it was a restaurant, and people were eating and drinking and talking, and the cash registers were like checking out, and noise and glasses falling, and I mean, it was chaos, and the actors just kept going. They kept going. I was having a heart attack. I thought I was going to go into labor in the corner. But I don't know how funny that story is, but it was a lesson for me. If I'm ever going to do a reading again, I'm never going to have props, number one. But also that, like anything, Pittsburgh was open to those kinds of experiences. And I just thought, okay, this is, maybe it didn't work this time, but, we'll see what will happen next time. But people were willing to work with me, and so that was good.
Well, I love that story. Comedians that do stand-up, they frequently are working in a place in which there's food and alcohol being served. Yeah. So there's the clinking of glasses, and there's people moving around and walking in front of them, and people yelling out things, and people chattering behind. All that. Same thing with anybody that's ever done a lounge act in Vegas or that kind of cabaret work. Right. So those people, I think, when you're able to get through that and let it not bother you, those people have a real chance of getting somewhere. Yeah. The actors were pretty resilient. They were going to just... They plowed
through. They were in it they did.
And, of course, then you hear famous stories about various actors on big stages, famous people, where a cell phone will go off or somebody's talking in the audience, and they'll stop the play and berate an audience. Yeah.
That's a little different.
That's totally different because they sort of have the right.
Well, because it's quiet. Nobody's like, it's not like a working restaurant.
No, that's correct. That's correct. Okay, and last question for you today. Yeah. What would you say is a piece of advice or a good tip for someone who is just starting out or maybe trying to make their bones, is maybe had a production or something? Yeah. What is your best advice for somebody who's trying to make their way? Yeah.
Well, it's I guess it's connected to self-producing. If you are not getting people producing your plays, first of all, you got to write. You got to write as much. You got to read as many plays as you can. You got to see as many plays, and then you got to do your due diligence and do the research and find out what theaters are around you. Start local and start getting involved with those theaters. And a theater isn't just going to do your play just because you send it to them under the on the transom. No. You have to invest in that theater, and then they may invest in you. But until that happens, you got to still have to see your plays up. So you got to self-produce. Put a reading together. Maybe not at Rosebud. It doesn't exist anymore, but maybe not at a restaurant. But there's plenty of places in Pittsburgh. And then find your collaborators.
And every major city.
Exactly. And find your collaborators. The small theaters. Say, hey, I got a play. I think it'd be perfect for you guys. The collaborators that you make when you're young are the ones that are going to end up championing you later. So, for instance, Seth Gordon, who's Associate Artistic Director at the Repertory Theater of St. Louis, he he did early readings of my plays at the showcase, CMU Showcase of New Plays. I have like a 25-year relationship with him, and I sent him a play every single year. And we worked a little bit, over the years, but then he produced Molly's Hammer. So I guess I would say just be proactive in your career. No one's going to like just, knock on your door and do your play.
No, it takes a long time for anybody to knock on your door.
Right, yes, it will take a while, if ever.
Hopefully you get to there, and truthfully, there are just a tiny number of people who have that happen to.
Yeah.
So I think this is extremely sound advice. I would add to that that you don't want to lose your shirt doing that.
Oh, no.
But you definitely want to find ways to get your stuff on so that you can see it and understand how it operates in the hands of actors and how an audience reacts.
Absolutely. But don't spend money. No. Don't spend money. Get a grant. Get some other people's money. Don't spend your own money.
Yeah, because unfortunately, a lot of people do that. They go spend a...
Yeah, no, I don't recommend that. Yeah.
No, the theater is not a place where you're going to make a ton of money anyway, unless you're very, very lucky.
Right.
So you need to be very smart about it.
Right.
But I love this piece of advice. It's that you need to have it. A play is not meant to just be literature.
Right.
It's actually meant to breathe with actors saying the words.
Right.
So I think that's a critical and key piece of advice.
Okay.
So Tammy, I thank you for stopping by today.
Thank you.
This has been terrific.
It's been fun. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, and so glad you came. And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.